My family forced me to pay for their actions by evicting me from the house, and my wife cheated on me and ran in. Hey everyone, before I get into this, I just want to say, if you're here, please consider subscribing, liking, and turning on notifications. Not a lot of people stick around until the end, and it really helps. Alright, let's get into it. Hi Reddit. I've always known I was the second son in my family. Not just in birth order, but in everything else that mattered. My brother, Alex, was the star, the loud, charismatic, effortlessly likable kid who had our parents wrapped around his finger from the moment he could talk. And me? I was just there. It wasn't even subtle. My parents worshipped Alex. He played soccer, and even if he wasn't the best, they treated him like he was destined for the World Cup. Every goal he scored was a monumental achievement. Every minor award he won was framed and hung up in the house like a trophy. It didn't matter that I was good at sports too. I ran track, I won medals, but my trophies ended up in a dusty box in the garage. If I ever brought them up, my mom would wave it off with a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before shifting the conversation back to Alex. I told myself it was fine. I didn't need the attention, but it kept happening. When I graduated high school with honors, barely a nod. When I got into a great college on a scholarship, a brief, good job, before my dad turned the conversation to Alex's latest soccer game. Even when I landed a solid, well-paying job right out of school, my achievements were treated like background noise. Meanwhile, if Alex so much as got a promotion at his part-time job, it became a family-wide celebration. I tried not to let it get to me. I really did. I told myself that it didn't matter if they acknowledged me or not, that I was building my own life, and that their validation wasn't something I needed. And for a while, I believed it. Until something happened that made it impossible to ignore anymore. When I was 23, my parents told me they were retiring. It wasn't a discussion, just an announcement. They sat me down one evening and explained that they couldn't keep up with the mortgage and household expenses on their retirement savings alone. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, they asked me to move back in to help out. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. I was young, I had a stable job, and I figured it was the right thing to do. They made it sound temporary, just until they got everything sorted financially. So, I packed up my apartment and moved back into my childhood home. Looking back, I should have seen what was really happening. At first, it was small things. I started covering a portion of the mortgage, just to help ease the burden. Then it became the utility bills, then groceries. Before I knew it, I was paying for almost everything: repairs, maintenance, even little upgrades my mom wanted for the house. If something broke, I fixed it. If something needed replacing, I was the one paying for it. Meanwhile, Alex was living on his own, free from any of these responsibilities. He had his own place, a nice one, in a trendy part of town. He spent money like it was nothing: expensive clothes, the newest gadgets, a new car every couple of years. And yet, every time I saw him, he had a new complaint about money. His rent was too high, his car payments were killing him, he was just trying to get by. Our parents, of course, sympathized with him. They never asked him to contribute, never suggested that he should help out like I was. Instead, they'd shake their heads and talk about how hard life was for him, how expensive everything had gotten. Meanwhile, I was quietly draining my paycheck into their home, sacrificing my own independence to make sure they were comfortable. At the time, I didn't realize how trapped I had become. I thought I was just doing my part, being the responsible son. But the truth was, I was being used. A few years passed, and I had fully settled into the role my parents had carved out for me. I was the one keeping the house running, making sure the bills were paid, handling every repair, and covering all the little expenses that they just couldn't manage on their fixed income. It had become my normal, and I barely questioned it anymore. Then everything changed. One evening, my parents sat me down, their expressions serious but strangely upbeat. My mom did most of the talking, her voice laced with that careful, rehearsed tone she always used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. She told me that Alex and his wife, Megan, were struggling. Their debts had piled up, and they were drowning in financial trouble. It was a tough time for them, and as a family, we had to support each other. I already knew Alex was bad with money. He and Megan lived way beyond their means, always upgrading their lifestyle even when they couldn't afford it. Fancy vacations, designer clothes, luxury cars they leased but could barely keep up with. None of it was surprising. What did surprise me was my parents' so-called solution to the problem. They wanted to move Alex and Megan into the house. And to make room for them, they needed me to leave. I just stared at them, waiting for some kind of clarification, something that would make this make sense. My dad cleared his throat and added that this would be a great opportunity for me to focus on my personal life, maybe get a place of my own and start fresh. It was said as if it was a favor, like they were helping me in some way by kicking me out of the house I had been financially supporting for years. But the worst part? They still expected me to help pay for the house. They wanted me to move out, find my own place, start my own life, yet somehow still contribute to the mortgage, the utilities, and whatever else they needed. When I asked why, my mom looked almost confused, as if I was being unreasonable. She said, "Well, you've been helping for so long. We just thought you'd want to keep supporting the family." That was the moment it all clicked. I had never been anything more than a backup for them. A second choice. A safety net. Alex had always come first, and he always would. I was useful when they needed me, but the second their golden boy needed saving, I was disposable. I didn't argue. I didn't yell or demand an explanation. I just sat there, listening to them justify their decision, nodding along as if I were considering it. But inside, something in me snapped. For the first time in my life, I saw my parents for who they really were. And I knew, right then and there, that I was done. I didn't argue with them. I didn't protest or try to make them see how unfair they were being. I had spent my entire life trying to be noticed, trying to matter, and I was done. Instead, I simply nodded, acting as though I was considering their plan, and let them believe I was on board. But in reality, I had already made my decision. That night, I started packing. Quietly, methodically. I didn't rush, didn't draw attention to what I was doing. Every day, I took a few things and moved them out, bit by bit, until almost everything I owned was gone. I found my own apartment, signed the lease, and without a word to anyone, I prepared to disappear from their lives just as easily as they had tried to push me out of theirs. On my last night in the house, I took the remaining boxes and loaded them into my car under the cover of darkness. I moved like a thief, careful not to wake my parents. It was strangely fitting, considering how they had always treated me, like someone who existed in the background, someone they didn't need to acknowledge unless it benefited them. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I didn't sit them down and have one last conversation. They didn't deserve it. Instead, I left a note on the kitchen counter, short and to the point. I found my own place. Don't contact me about money. Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, and never looked back. Before they even had the chance to reach out, I blocked them. My parents, Alex, even Megan. Every number, every social media account, even LinkedIn. I cut them off completely, erased them from my life in the same way they had erased me when they decided I was no longer useful to them. For the first time in years, I felt free. There was no more obligation, no more weight of expectations pressing down on me. No more waiting for validation that would never come. I stepped into my new apartment, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in my life, I was finally my own person. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything about them. I had settled into my new place, enjoying the quiet, the freedom, the complete absence of obligations weighing me down. I wasn't constantly thinking about bills that weren't mine or fixing things in a house that I would never truly belong to. For the first time in years, I was just living for myself. Then my phone rang. It was Uncle Rick. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He wasn't someone who called often, and I knew he wouldn't reach out unless something serious had happened. The moment I picked up, I heard it in his voice, tension, frustration, and just a little bit of disbelief. "They're panicking, Jake," he said. "Your parents. The house is on the line. They can't keep up with the mortgage, and the bank is ready to foreclose." I wasn't surprised, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "They didn't tell you, did they?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course they didn't. They took out a second mortgage years ago. You know what for? Alex. They've been sending him money for years. Thousands of dollars. Paying off his debts, covering his lifestyle, making sure he never had to struggle." I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me, like a puzzle finally coming together. It all made sense now. The constant financial strain, the way they had pushed so much of the household expenses onto me, the desperation to keep me paying even after they wanted me gone. They had been bleeding themselves dry for Alex, and now, without my money propping them up, they had nothing left. "They need you to fix this," Uncle Rick continued. "They said you should do the right thing and help them out. They want you to cover the payments until they get back on their feet." I almost laughed. After everything, they still expected me to save them. They still thought I would step in and clean up the mess they had made. "No," I said simply. "It's not my problem." There was a long pause, as if he was waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, he sighed. "I figured that's what you'd say," he admitted. "I don't blame you. Neither did I. I had spent years being their safety net, their backup plan, the son they only acknowledged when they needed something from me. And now that they had nothing left, they were finally feeling what it was like to be on their own. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I thought that was the end of it. I had made my decision, walked away, and left them to deal with the consequences of their own actions. But as the days passed, something kept gnawing at me. Not guilt, not sympathy, but an understanding of the opportunity in front of me. This wasn't just about walking away. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I had the power in this situation. So I made my move. I reached out, not to my parents, but directly to the bank. I knew the house was on the verge of foreclosure, and I wanted to know exactly how bad it was. It was worse than I expected. They were months behind. The second mortgage had drained their equity, and if something wasn't done soon, the house would be gone. I didn't care about saving my parents, but I did care about making sure they never had the ability to use me again. When I finally spoke to them, I laid out my offer, not as a request, but as a decision already made. I would take over the house. The mortgage would be transferred into my name, and legally, it would be mine. They could stay, but only under one condition. Alex had to pay rent. The reaction was instant. My parents went pale, exchanging frantic glances like they were hoping the other would find some magical way out of this. And Alex? He lost it. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're screwing me over. This house is my inheritance." I just smiled, shaking my head. "Inheritance?" I repeated. "I've been paying for all of this for years while you've been living off the land. If anyone was inheriting this house, it was me." Alex wasn't used to hearing the truth, and it showed. His face turned red, his hands clenched into fists, and for a second, I thought he might actually lunge at me. But I wasn't the same person who used to quietly accept being second place. I wasn't backing down. My parents hesitated for a long time. They tried everything: guilt, excuses, even begging. But I didn't waver. They had no choice. The bank wasn't going to wait, and without my help, they were losing the house. In the end, they agreed. They had to. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the second son. I was the one calling the shots. As expected, Alex didn't pay a cent. I had known it the moment I made the deal. My parents had agreed to my terms out of desperation, but they had never actually believed I would go through with it. They thought I would cave, that I would make excuses for Alex like they always had. But I wasn't them. 3 months passed, and not a single payment came in from Alex. Not a dime toward rent. Not even an attempt. He lived in the house as if nothing had changed, lounging on the couch, eating food he didn't buy, using utilities he wasn't paying for. He acted like he was untouchable, so I gave him an official warning. I didn't argue or waste time with empty threats. I handed him written notice that he had 60 days to either pay what he owed or find another place to live. He laughed in my face, saying I was bluffing, that I would never actually kick out my own brother. He was wrong. 3 months later, I filed the eviction papers. That was when everything exploded. Alex went into a full-blown meltdown. He shouted that I was a traitor, that I was tearing the family apart, that I was cruel for doing this to him. My mother cried, pleading with me to reconsider, her voice breaking as she begged me not to abandon my brother. My father sat in the shadows, saying nothing, just watching everything unfold like a man who had long since lost control of his own household. But I didn't back down. "You kicked me out without hesitation," I told them coldly. "Why should I take care of him now?" There was no answer to that. None that made sense, anyway. They tried everything: guilt, emotional blackmail, desperate attempts to manipulate me like they always had. But it was different now. I wasn't the naive son who spent his life begging for scraps of approval. I was done being their safety net. In the end, they had no choice. My parents packed their things and moved in with Uncle Rick, who, to his credit, took them in despite knowing the mess they had made. Alex, on the other hand, had burned every bridge. With nowhere else to go, he ended up sleeping on the couch in his office, furious at the world, convinced that I had somehow ruined his life. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I had spent years being cast aside, treated like an afterthought, used and discarded whenever it was convenient for them. And now? Now I was free. Megan didn't stick around for long. Without the house, without the illusion of stability that my parents had created for Alex, she saw the situation for what it was. Within a few months, she was gone, moving on to a new life where she no longer had to carry the weight of Alex's endless financial disasters. I heard through the grapevine that she remarried a couple of years later, someone with an actual sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, I made the house my own. For the first time, it felt like a real home, not just a place where I had been trapped out of obligation. I renovated it piece by piece, making it into something that reflected my own life, not the one I had been forced into. I turned Alex's old room into a gym, replacing every trace of him with something useful, something that actually contributed to my happiness. The rest of the house followed. The walls that had once held only Alex's achievements now displayed my own, though, ironically, I didn't need them for validation anymore. Not long after, I met the woman who would become my wife. She was nothing like the people I had grown up around. She was kind, supportive, and she saw me for who I was, not for what I could provide. We built a life together, one that had nothing to do with the past that had tried so hard to define me. And now, we're expecting our first child. At some point, My parents finally came to terms with the new reality. My mother, for the first time in my life, started bragging about me to her friends. It was strange hearing it secondhand, knowing that the son she had ignored for decades had suddenly become someone she wanted to show off. My father, usually a man of few words, eventually sat me down and admitted what I had always known. He and my mother had underestimated me. He even apologized, and for once, I could tell he actually meant it. And Alex? He never changed. He never took responsibility, never grew from his mistakes, never stopped blaming the world for his failures. He bounced from job to job before finally settling at a mobile phone shop, still convinced he was meant for something greater but unwilling to put in the work. He still asks our mother for money, and she still gives it to him, though much less than before. Even she has started to see him for what he really is. As for me, I don't think about them much anymore. My life moved forward, and for the first time, it was entirely my own. Life had finally settled into something peaceful. I had my home, my wife, and the family I was building, free from the weight of my past. I thought that was the end of it, that I had closed the door on everything that had once held me back. But then, out of nowhere, it all came crashing down in a way I never could have imagined. It started with a phone call. Another one I almost didn't answer. It was Uncle Rick again, but this time his voice was tense in a way that sent a chill down my spine. "Jake, something happened," he said. "It's about Alex." For a moment, I thought it was another financial disaster, another reckless mistake that had finally caught up to him. But then Rick took a deep breath and said something I never expected. "He's in jail, charged with murder." The words didn't register at first. Murder? Alex? It didn't make sense. As much of a screw-up as he was, he had never been violent. He was lazy, selfish, and entitled, but murder? It felt impossible. But the more I listened, the clearer the picture became. Alex had been living in a spiral ever since losing the house. His money was gone, Megan had left, and his resentment toward me had only grown. He had fallen in with the wrong people, the kind who promised quick money and an easy way out. The details were still unclear, but from what Rick knew, there had been a fight, something about a deal gone wrong, someone owing someone else money. It ended with a man dead, and Alex, in a fit of desperation, had been the one holding the weapon when the police arrived. I thought that was where my involvement ended, but I was wrong. A week later, I was served with a lawsuit. My own parents were suing me. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some kind of clerical error. But when I read the paperwork, the reality hit me like a freight train. They were trying to claim that I had financially manipulated them into signing over the house, that I had taken advantage of them in their time of need and forced them into an agreement they didn't fully understand. Their goal was clear. They wanted the house back, wanted the financial safety net I had taken away, and most of all, they wanted me to be responsible for Alex's legal fees. It was almost laughable. Almost. But the betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. These were the same people who had kicked me out without hesitation, the same ones who had drained their own finances dry to keep Alex afloat, the same ones who had never cared about my well-being until it benefited them. And now, even after everything, they had the audacity to try and take back what I had rightfully earned, all to clean up another one of Alex's messes. I didn't panic. I didn't break down. I had spent years playing their game, and I knew exactly how to end it. I hired the best lawyer I could find and fought them every step of the way. I exposed every bank statement, every bill, every payment I had ever made on that house. I made sure there was no room for doubt about who had truly been responsible for keeping that place afloat. In the end, they lost. The case was dismissed before it even reached trial, thrown out for lack of evidence and blatant manipulation. But the damage was done. Any lingering illusion that there was still something salvageable in my relationship with my parents was gone. They had made their choice, and so had I. When it was over, I sent one final message to them. A single sentence, nothing more. "You are dead to me." And this time, I meant it. Winning the trial should have been the end of it. I had fought back, stood my ground, and made it clear that I was done being used. The case was thrown out, my parents lost, and Alex was left to face the consequences of his own actions. I should have been able to move on, to finally leave them behind for good. But things were never that simple. It started with small things. At first, I barely noticed. A car I didn't recognize parked across the street for too long. A man sitting outside a cafe near my office, looking at me just a little too intently. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, that the stress of everything that had happened had put me on edge. But then the incidents became harder to ignore. My apartment was broken into, though nothing was stolen. Just a mess, drawers pulled open, papers scattered, as if someone had been looking for something. My tires were slashed one morning before work. I started getting anonymous calls, heavy breathing on the other end, silence before the line cut off. I didn't want to believe it had anything to do with Alex, but deep down, I knew. He had fallen in with the wrong people, the kind who didn't just forget debts, the kind who didn't care that he was sitting in a jail cell unable to pay them back. And if he couldn't, they would find someone else to make up for it. I didn't wait to find out what they had planned. I packed what little I needed, emptied my accounts, and disappeared. I flew to Europe under a different name, cutting every remaining tie to my old life. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Uncle Rick. It was the only way to be safe. I moved from city to city at first, never staying too long in one place, always watching over my shoulder. But eventually, I found somewhere that felt right, a small coastal town where no one knew me, where I could finally breathe again. And that was where I met her. She was nothing like the women I had known before. She had no idea about my past, no connection to the wreckage I had left behind. She knew me only as the man who had arrived one day and built a new life from nothing. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. We fell in love the way I had always imagined love should be, effortless, without the weight of expectations or manipulation. We built something real, something that had nothing to do with my past or the people I had left behind. A year later, we were married. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. No ghosts from my past, no debts I didn't owe, no shadows waiting to pull me back. Just a new life, one that belonged only to me. Life had finally settled into something peaceful. I had built a new life, found love again, and for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. My past felt like a distant memory, something that had happened to someone else. I had no contact with my family, no ties to the chaos I had escaped, and I had convinced myself that this time, things were different. But I was wrong. It started with a suspicion, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. My wife had been distant, spending more time on her phone, always finding an excuse to leave the room when she got a message. At first, I brushed it off. I had been through enough betrayal in my life, and I didn't want to let paranoia ruin the one good thing I had left. But as the weeks passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. One night, I finally gave in to my gut feeling and checked her laptop while she was asleep. I had expected to find messages, maybe some hidden social media accounts. What I found was worse. She had an OnlyFans account. Not just any account, but one with thousands of followers, running for months without me ever knowing. And it wasn't just pictures or videos. She had been interacting with people, private streams, personal conversations, things that made it clear this wasn't just about money. I felt sick. I wanted to wake her up, to demand an explanation, to understand how she could lie to me so easily. But before I could even process what I had found, things took an even darker turn. As I scrolled through her page, one notification caught my eye, a live stream. My stomach dropped as I clicked on it, not knowing what I was about to see. And then there it was. She was live, in real time, with another man. I couldn't breathe. My mind refused to process what I was watching, what was happening right in front of me. She hadn't just been hiding an account. She had been cheating on me, publicly, for anyone willing to pay to see. And now, without even realizing it, I had walked straight into the worst moment of my life, broadcasted for the world to witness. I don't remember closing the laptop. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the dark screen, trying to convince myself that this wasn't real, that the woman I had trusted, the person I had built a new life with, hadn't just humiliated me in front of strangers for profit. By the time she came home the next morning, I was gone. But I wasn't the only one who had something to say about it. She had built a brand, a following, a reputation on that platform. And in her arrogance, she had made one fatal mistake. She had used my name, my image, my life as part of her content. So I sued her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't care about exposing her or ruining her career. I just wanted her out of my life, and I wanted every single connection she had to me erased. The case dragged on for months. She tried to defend herself, to claim that it was just business, that I was overreacting. But there was no argument strong enough to justify what she had done, and in the end, the court agreed. I won. She lost her platform, her income, everything she had built off my back. And for the second time in my life, I walked away from betrayal, leaving nothing behind. I had rebuilt my life before, and now I would do it again. But this time, I wouldn't let anyone close enough to destroy it. And that's where it ends. After everything, after my family's betrayal, after fleeing my own past, after thinking I had finally built something stable, I found myself right back where I started. Alone, rebuilding from nothing, picking up the pieces of a life that had been shattered by people I had trusted. But the difference this time? I wasn't broken. I won. I walked away with my dignity, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. I had been burned too many times, but each time, I came back stronger. I don't know what the future holds, and I honestly don't care. All I know is that whatever happens next, it's on my terms. But what do you think? Would you have done the same in my position? Would you have sued her? Or would you have just walked away and let her deal with the consequences? And as for my parents and Alex, do you think they ever truly learned their lesson? Or are they still out there, blaming the world for their failures? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.